So what if you had a totally clear, step-by-step way to check one of the biggest, most profound claims anyone could ever make? I'm not talking about faith or charisma. I mean a direct audit of their mind. Well, today, we're cracking open an ancient Buddhist guide that does exactly that.
Just picture it for a second. Someone looks you dead in the eye and says, "I'm fully enlightened. I've achieved total liberation." I mean, what's your first reaction? In our world today, you'd probably either dismiss them instantly, or maybe you just kind of blindly accept it. But what if there's a third option, a better way?
Well, there is. Believe it or not, over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha laid out a super precise method for investigating this exact claim. And this isn't some list of beliefs you have to check off. No, it's a rigorous multi-step examination, all laid out in an ancient text called the Chabbisodhanasutta. It's basically the sixfold purity discourse.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at the ultimate claim. Then we'll dive into the three big tests: unbinding the senses, starving the fire, and the final boss, uprooting the eye. And we'll wrap up by seeing what the actual evidence looks like, the path to a truly boundless mind.
Okay, so let's set the stage. In the original text, the scene is this. A monk walks up to his fellow monks and makes the most incredible declaration of spiritual achievement you can imagine.
And this is it. This is the claim. It's an absolute no-holds-barred statement. It means they've done the work, they've ended the cycle of suffering, and they've completely transformed their existence. Think of it like the spiritual equivalent of not just climbing Everest, but maybe building it. So the big question is, how do you possibly verify that?
This is where the Buddha's advice is just so brilliant. He says, look, don't immediately praise them, but also don't immediately tear them down. Instead, you start a calm, rational, really structured investigation. The whole point is inquiry, not judgment.
Now, to really unpack this ancient audit, we're going to use a special method I call the two-lens translation. First, we'll look at things through a modern lens, the crisp, direct dictionary meaning we'd use today. But then, and this is the cool part, we're going to switch to an ancient lens. We'll dig right down to the root meaning of the original Pali words. This lets us uncover the core intention, to see it exactly how it was understood all those centuries ago. Okay, test number one. It starts with the most fundamental thing there is, our direct moment-by-moment experience of the world, how we take everything in through our senses.
So the first question gets asked across these four channels. Basically, how do you relate to what you see? What about what you hear and what you sense? Smell, taste, touch. And then finally, what about the thoughts and ideas that just pop into your head? What is cognized?
And the monk's answer is pretty profound. He says that for all four of those things, he lives with a mind that is totally unbound, released, and without any borders. I mean, that sounds beautiful, right? But let's dig into what that actually means.
Okay, so a key Pali phrase he uses is vimaryadikatena cetasa. And this is where our two-lens approach really shows us something fascinating.
Check out this difference. The modern lens, our standard translation, gives us with a boundless mind. It sounds passive, right? It just describes a state. But the ancient lens, when we go to the root of the word, reveals an action. It's not just that the mind is boundless, it's a mind that has actively deconstructed its own borders. It's the difference between stumbling upon an open field and being the one who personally tore down every single fence post.
All right, let's move on to the second test. After looking at the senses, the audit goes a level deeper. It starts probing the very building blocks of what we think of as our self. This next question is all about something called the 5 upadana. Now, just think of these as the 5 core ingredients we use to build our identity. You've got your physical body, your feelings, your perceptions or labels for things, your mental habits, and finally, consciousness itself. The whole package.
So, through our modern lens, that word upadana is almost always translated as clinging or grasping. We'd cling to our body, we cling to our ideas. It sounds like we're just holding on really tight. But switch to the ancient lens, and you get this much more dynamic and, honestly, a much more powerful image. The root meaning of abadana isn't just clinging, it's fuel, as in the stuff you feed a fire. And that one little shift changes everything, doesn't it? It means we're not just passively holding on to parts of ourselves. We are actively using them as fuel for the fire of our own stress and suffering. So, an enlightened person? There's simply someone who has stopped throwing fuel on the fire.
And that brings us to the final, most decisive question in this whole audit. This is the big one. This goes right to the heart of it all, to the very source code of the ego.
The question is just breathtakingly direct. It's how, exactly, have the deep-seated unconscious habits of I-making and mind-making, that constant process of identifying a self, been completely and totally uprooted?
And here's the crucial part. The answer can't just be some clever philosophical argument or a quote from a book. Nope. To pass this final test, the monk has to show their work. They have to lay out the entire story of their spiritual journey as evidence, detailing the specific steps that led to this uprooting.
So, this final section of the audit is all about presenting that evidence. The monk basically lays out his entire resume, the whole progression of his training, and that is the answer to that final, critical question.
And this is the path he lays out. It starts with a pretty radical act, going forth, leaving behind a normal home life. From there, it's this meticulous process of mastering virtue, then guarding the senses, being aware of everything coming in without getting swept away. All of that builds a foundation for deep meditation, which ultimately leads to the direct insight that cuts the mental outflows, those deep, unconscious cravings and biases, right at the root.
And just like that, we've come full circle. That initial statement, "I dwell with a boundless mind," isn't just a poetic claim anymore, is it? We can now see it as the verified result of an incredibly detailed and rigorous journey. The audit is complete, the claim checks out.
But this ancient audit isn't just some historical tool for vetting monks. It's really a detailed map of the mind's potential. It lays out a clear path from a mind that's boxed in by borders to one that is truly boundless. And that leaves us with one final question. Not for the monk, but for you. Looking at this map, where on this path do you see yourself?